Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Lifting. Today's episode is being recorded on 3/16/25. I'm back with Ryan again today, and we are going over to Assassin's Creed lore. This is actually going to be quite fascinating. But before we do this, I'm going to now open this circle within true benevolence and no conflicting agendas at this moment in time. So, Ryan, go right ahead.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode. It's going to be Assassin's Creed related. We're going to talk about the history of that universe and its lore as like an entry thing, and we might come back to it in the future if this video does well. But let's just jump right into it. So we start in the ancient past, and we don't really even have a date for this, but it's like the mythological past. And that's like 50,000 years ago at least. And we start with the Isu. And the Isu are basically, or the precursors as they're called, they're basically the gods of all the old pagan religions, turned into real living people that are not human, but are like advanced humanoids that live on Earth, that have a very high technology society before us. And they make us as a labor force to do labor for them. So we're a slave race made for them.
Essentially, it's the Anunnaki story being told. Yeah.
Yes, that's the early idea was that it's the Anunnaki story, but then every other god group was in there as well as Isu. Like the Norse gods are there, the Greek gods are Isu, the Roman gods are just also the Greek gods as Isu, and I'm just gonna figure out exactly when they. 77,000 years ago was when the Isu fell, essentially. And so they make us as modern humans from proto-humans, and they turn us into a slave force, and they make artifacts to control us. And that is the ancient premise of these games. And they have like this super high, almost utopian society. They're still fighting within the factions there, but it's high technology and very one with nature, in the sense that like they didn't destroy the world atmosphere and things. And they've got like this neo historical look to things, made out of interesting like geometric patterns, and you'll see that in the few times you go to Isu like related ruins in the games. But this is a good image to show like Isu architecture and stuff. It seems very classical in some senses, but also futuristic in others.
Kind of like how Marvel's depiction of Asgard, in a way,
Yeah. Marvel's depiction of Asgard is definitely an inspiration towards that, as well as, I think, basically, what if an ancient society just had a bunch of technology and adopted very like geometric computer-looking patterns. And they ruled over the world and made multiple cool artifacts that we have that come down to humanity in the games. And they're the ways, basically, that they controlled us. So Apples of Eden are the big one. Basically, they held them, and like you can control humans to do whatever you want with them. They can a strong human with Isu blood can resist to this and make use of these artifacts easier. Other people can't. The Staff of Hermes Trismegistus will keep the user alive if they hold it. That's a sword from one of the DLC for one of the games. It's just a sword that can do like cool magical like effects. Basically, the idea of behind Assassin's Creed is magic, that we view it in the past is all technology that the Isu created. So the Isu society was thriving and very powerful. And then the sun did like a solar storm, and a solar flares like took out their society and burned up a majority of the population. And some Isu tried to stop it or get around it by using high technology. Some were somewhat successful, others were failures. They were able to keep humanity alive, but most of them died out, and so only a few Isu like survived the apocalyptic solar flares in like bunkers and stuff. Humanity somehow survived and came back, and that's how our history starts about whenever we keep going. That's another one of their artifacts. This one's cool. It's like the crystal skulls, and you bring it to this temple, and if you have a little bit of the blood of any person you want to like view, you can put it in that cube, and then you can like use it, and you can like see through their eyes and stuff technologically.
Oh yeah, that's like the crystal skulls. Even though the current Mitchell Hedges thing wasn't, I found it an actual thing. What they're also proposing, like with the Isu city, that's more also like Atlantis with the concentric circles, and also using the skulls as more of a viewing device. That happened in galactic history, where seers on Atlantis would use them for that purpose. So yeah, that's very similar.
And these artifacts are like main story points throughout the games. You interact with them commonly, and they're used to move the plot along in ways that intertie the Isu past with like the historical fantasy that you're living in. We will go in at the later time to talk about the different games and which ones are really good historically and which ones are, I would go as far as to say, historical fantasy games that are not historical in any way, shape, or form. But that's a later debate. So now we get into human history as we know it, and we have two major factions that are vying kind of to drive the development of humanity. You have the Assassins, which is like the main group. Everyone's called Assassin's Creed. Most games you play as an assassin, not all of them. Or you start out as one and you flip sides, or kind of stuff like that. The Assassins, or in some of the games that take place before the Crusader era, are called the Hidden Ones. They are all about freedom of human choice and human ability to do what we want instead of being controlled. And they take a lot of inspiration from the Middle East group called the Hashishins from the Crusader period. Usually they wear robes with hoods, and they have a signature weapon, the wrist blades, that in ancient days, before the Middle Age, like the Renaissance period, actually required the removal of the ring finger to work. Well, unless you're Eivor from Assassin's Creed Valhalla, who just puts it on the back of his hand instead and just punches people, and then the blade comes up.
Oh yeah.
He's the only one before that era that does that. But basically, the way it works is you have like a ring on, and as you flex your hand out, it releases the blade, and it's cool. They fight with them. They will like drop from ledges and stab people with them. They'll like do concealed stuff where they'll like hide in bushes and then pull people in and stab them, all kinds of cool stuff like that. The classic hide in a haystack, pull a guy in, stab him, that's in there. And we need to talk about in the past, the humans did try to uprise against the Isu, and that's why these artifacts were made, to control them. So it was called the Human Isu War, and the Assassins' like whole idea is we shouldn't be controlled. They didn't know that we were made as a slave race, but we shouldn't be controlled, so we're going to try to stop that. This is the greatest assassin, in my opinion, of the whole series, Ezio Auditore, from games 2, Brotherhood, and Revelations. Highly recommend picking up, if you just want to like get into the Assassin's Creed thing, pick up the Ezio collection, and it'll be a cool adventure through Italy and Constantinople in the Renaissance period. So the Assassins have a great rival, the Templar Order. We know about the Templars historically. They were a knightly order in the Crusades, mostly French in the beginning, but they essentially intend to drive humanity by sort of controlling quietly, controlling everything quietly, and in the sense of you have no choice, but you don't know you have no choice. And prior to that, they've been known as the Cult of Cosmos and the Order of the Ancients throughout history. But by the time of the Renaissance, the Crusades, they take on the name the Templars. They talk about their motto is "May the Father of Understanding guide us," and part of it's lost because there's a second part that like the ancient ones had that was like "May the Mother of Earth guard us" or something. And in the first game, they are just Templar Knights that are opposed to the Assassins. In later games, they tend to be elite that are trying to drive like political and world takeover through backroom channels. Their whole goal would be to have all of humanity dumbed down and just kind of subservient while they run everything. Mm-hmm. And the Assassins, of course, go against that, being all about freedom. And at times they have had truces when major things were going on. But by the modern era, they're hidden behind a corporation called Abstergo Industries. And the Assassins are still kind of just the Assassins. And the Assassins are not doing well in the Templar Assassin War that has raged since the Middle Ages and before. Because they're pretty much being hunted down by Abstergo, and it's like pseudo paramilitary forces, and the Assassins are having to fight back against them while trying to stop a return of the solar flares that took out Isu civilization, which are going to happen again. And so the whole plot of the first games is to stop this solar activity, essentially, and it does happen. And I'm not going to spoil it now.
Assassin's Creed Valhalla is actually taking place. Yeah,
it happens, but it doesn't take out society in the same ways. But it does mess up our technology a lot. And yes, basically the whole 2012 Armageddon thing that people talk about was solar activity based, and they used technology to stop or to shield the planet where the Isu couldn't. They used old Isu technology and got it working by some stuff that is plot line wise. And if you play through the games, I'm not going to spoil that for y'all, but they get it to work. It's really sad though. And the world still has like a permanent aurora because of this activity. And the war rages on. So now we can talk about the periods of history that you get to play in these games, and I will, as we get up to them, say if I think that they are good games. So, starting at 500 BC, because we don't have a game before then, we get to the Peloponnesian Wars, and you get Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Now, if you want a game where you run around ancient Greece and you look at the cool architecture, great game for that. Historically speaking, the armor and stuff looks cool. It's a bit fantasized version of Greek armor and stuff. You do get a cool sense of like the societies of Sparta and Athens and the other city-states in Greece. My biggest issue with this game is they threw out the whole idea of cool hoplite warfare from ancient Greece and just made all the big battles like mob fights where everybody's just like intermixed fighting like with swords and stuff instead of spears. And from a historian standpoint, that's not cool, but it was easier than making these big set-piece battles for a game. But it's definitely a cool game. Highly recommend it. It's beautiful, especially if you really want to just like run around ancient Greece and sort of see kind of what we think that society looked like as opposed to anything like military-wise being accurate. Assassin's Creed Origins takes place at the very end of Ptolemaic Egypt and the beginning of Roman Egypt when Caesar and Mark Antony and Cleopatra were around. Mm-hmm. and it starts with Ptolemaic Egypt and ends with Rome just taking Egypt. In fact, it is kind of implied that the hidden ones have a hand in creating the assassination of Julius Caesar as like a head Templar guy from the Order of the Ancients. I've heard very good things about that game, but I have not played it, so I cannot.
Yeah, I've not played the Origins.
Talk on it. There's so many games in this series, and playing all of them is, and you come in and out of it. But
essentially, they're showing the origins of the Cabal, essentially, since that's essentially Egypt. They're essentially showing also Templar eventually in real life become essentially Masons and all of those Knights of Malta, although those types of groups too. So yeah.
Okay, Valhalla. Takes place. Valhalla takes place in like the 870s, I think, in middle 800s AD, maybe 849. I'm not positive off the top of my head what year it takes place in exactly, but it's a Viking game, and you go with the Great Heathen Army, and you attack Britain. You start out in Norway. There's this guy or girl named Eivor, which is the reincarnation of Odin, because some of the Isu use technology to allow themselves to be reincarnated as humans after the fact. It's not very clear why they did this, because
to survive is the assumption that I made, but
yeah, but it's not like they were doing it to like try to stop the solar activity from happening again. They just did it to like continue, and then they have issues with like the old versions of the gods meeting each other and their dynamics, because they're not in the same social levels as they were in the past. It's cool as a Viking Age fantasy game where you play as like a Viking that kills everything and has a lot of mythological elements in it. As a historical game, I would not recommend it, but if you're into like Viking fantasy, you'll like it.
Mm-hmm.
You can do
I've also
River
noticed that the way they did the whole machine reincarnation grid thing. I'm thinking that's not the way I would have put it was that they just reincarnated to try to stop the solar activity, which is also a scam that's running in the New Age circles now. Is a solar flash narrative, but also it's also the fake reincarnation grid is kind of what they hinted at too through technology. Is what I'm thinking somebody was hinting at. Unsure whether they knew it or not, but somebody brought it through because that's an actual thing. There's real reincarnation, and then there's the fake one where you're forcibly thrown into through like a forced cycle. The Orions came up with that, so I'm thinking they're loosely touching on that. I hated the fact they integrated the Yorksville tree into that whole thing. That's really supposed to be a representation of the timelines, but I hate the fact how they meshed all of that together. They had the have the all have. I just hated how they did it. That's all.
Yeah, it's a cool game if you were into Vikings and stuff, but otherwise, you get to meet cool characters from like Viking history and stuff. Like, I think they do Ivar the Boneless really cool, and
yeah, they did. Yeah, they did.
But it's not the best game, and I wouldn't recommend it for anyone who wants like historical accuracy. Okay, so then you get to the Altair stuff, which is the Crusades. In about like 1050 ish, I think probably 1100 ish. And that Altair is like the new head of the Order of Assassins. He's kind of the one that reforms the assassins into what they become going forward. And this is all in the backdrop of the Crusades. That actually, I believe, is Altair, and his name is Altair ibn Ahad, and he stops the Templars and even learns that the Assassin Grandmaster is a Templar and has been kind of palpatining the whole situation by like playing both sides against each other, and he stops it. And then he has his own issues with people in the Order, where he gets exiled for a while, and then he comes back and leads them. He's friends with Marco Polo by the end of the game, by the end of his life, I mean. And he even finds Isu artifacts that let him record his memories, so that future generations can see them. And he is a very cool character, who's overshadowed by this great tragedy in his entire existence.
What's interesting is, basically playing both sides of the war. That's what the Rothschilds are famous for doing as well. Rumor has it that they fueled both sides of the Napoleonic conflicts and things of that nature. And in modern day, that regurgitates as they're fueling both sides of gang warfare, drug warfare, and basically capitalizing on both ends of the spectrum. Essentially, these are like Cabal clans, Order of the Ancients and Assassins, all the Templar, all this seems to be like almost essentially like Cabal factions fighting each other. And in modern day, you have Rockefeller and Rothschild basically slamming each other, both politically and it's like a shifting of the cuffs type war, but also they do gang warfare, things of that nature. This sounds very similar to that process.
And because Assassin's Creed with Altair is the first game, this is the most historically accurate, with a few the Apple of Eden makes its first appearance, but otherwise and at that point they were just known as the precursors. We didn't know anything about the Isu. We just knew that they had these cool technologies that they left us, but most of it's just a historical game where you're taking out Templars in the backdrop of Crusader era Levant.
Okay.
I don't know what Rebellion is. That must be a mobile game or something.
I think you're right. I think that was a minor one. Yeah.
There's a lot of games that were made for mobile and stuff that. Oh yeah, okay. It's a base builder set in 1400. Okay. Sorry. Like I said, not all. There's so many games, and we can't. I don't know
all of them. Yeah, I didn't even know about that one. Yes.
Yeah, it's a mobile game base builder. So now we get up to the Renaissance era, and that is basically the late 1400s, and you play as the man, the myth, the legend, Ezio Auditore de Firenze, and he, as his name implies, he's from Florence, the heart of the Italian Renaissance. And in the first game that you play as him, you actually go through him becoming a man. You actually see his birth in the opening scenes of that game. And then you play as him as a young man, a lower noble that just kind of runs around the city boozing and having his way with women, and fighting a gang led by another young noble who's sort of in the same position, who happens to be a Templar, and Ezio happens to be from a family of assassins, but he doesn't know that yet. And then the Templars basically illustrate things so that Ezio's whole family gets executed publicly, and Ezio happens to get away and then watches it and freaks out and has this, I am Ezio Auditore. And then they hunt him down, and he basically learns from all these assassin masters that are people he was just told to get in contact with by his mother and his sister, who are still there. And he basically learns to be an assassin without knowing he's an assassin. And he's not even a full-fledged assassin until very late in the game. But he's learning how to be an assassin without being inducted into the order. And he takes out the Templars, and he gets the Apple of Eden, and he becomes what is known as the Prophet, which there's this prophecy that says basically he will have a role to play, but nobody knows what it means. And he shows up, and he gets the apple, and they go to Rome because the Pope is the big bad evil guy, Templar Rodrigo Borgia, and they fight at the end of that game, and they fight using. Ezio has an Apple of Eden. The Pope has the Papal Staff, which is also a Isu artifact. And then when Ezio beats him, spoilers because Ezio beats him because it's a video game and you're the main character. He merges the staff and the apple and opens a temple underground where he learns about the whole Isu thing. When he meets some of like basically recorded messages from Isu God characters, and learns basically that he is a vessel to warn the future. Because the whole point of these games is you're using something called the animus to go back through the genetic memory in your DNA to see through the events that your ancestors lived through.
Hmm.
And so the main character in the modern day in that era, named Desmond, is a direct descendant of Ezio and is viewing this through the animus. And actually, Ezio kind of learns that, and he learns about this guy named Desmond that's viewing him. And that's not mentioned for 2 games, because then you have 2 more Ezio games. One is called Brotherhood, where you go to Rome to rebuild the Assassin Brotherhood in Rome and start like actively and stopping the Templars' other plots. Rodrigo Borgia still is Pope at this point, but he's kind of neutered by his son, Cesare Borgia, who's the new big bad evil guy. Obviously, they stopped that and his plans, which were more just like take over everything, get rich. And then you have Revelations, where Ezio goes to Constantinople to get the keys to unlock a Masyaf temple where Altair was like basically ended his life. And over the course of that game, Ezio finds these, basically they're discs looking things, but they're the artifacts that Altair put his memories on. And then Ezio gets to relive Altair's memories, and you get to do that through this process. So it's very cool that they've like tied the animus back into these like ancient artifacts, and it's implied that like the animus was based on them. And they basically Ezio ends his major assassin's career in this game by having an opportunity to get another Apple of Eden and saying no, and he leaves it in this temple where he finds Altair's body, and he essentially retires with his new girl that he met in Constantinople named Sophia, and they have a family and he has kids. And there's a whole movie where you get to see him like die essentially as just an old man. And you get to see that his life turned out good, which is like really rare inside of this game series, because this game series, a lot of people just have terrible lives after their games. But Ezio gets to go back to Florence, get basically back his family home, and raise his child, and he does pretty well. And he actually, when he's in this Masyaf temple at the end of that game, he remembers this message, and he's like, I don't know by what means you're watching this, but I know you're here, Desmond, and you should take the examples of my life and use them to keep the assassin's message and purpose going. And that like freaks out Desmond, who is like, he's talking to me. And then that game ends, and we get into the next game. Well, the next game in the series is 3, but we have a couple games to get through there. So Assassin's Creed Chronicles China is another like minor release game. I didn't play it. I have no idea what it's about. I know you play in China. I believe it was it's like a side scroller game. And it was for the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. And it takes place in 16th century Imperial China during the Ming Dynasty. That's all I know about that game. Unfortunately, it's not a game that I've played.
Yeah, I didn't do that one either.
It's not a main series game, so not a lot of people who play Assassin's Creed play it, and I don't think there's major lore established in it or anything. It's just like a game in the series. Now you come to one of the greatest games in the Assassin's Creed thing, Assassin's Creed Black Flag, which takes place during the golden age of piracy in the early 1700s in the the Caribbean and Bahamas, and you play as Edward Kenway, a privateer turned pirate turned assassin by the end of his game. The whole beginning of the game is he sneaks into basically a Templar group by chance because he kills an assassin that was going to double cross the assassins, and he then poses as this man because he wants to get paid because he sees that he can get a lot of money for showing up to the Templars. And then the Templars just believe it's him for a while, that he's just this guy, Duncan Walpole, that he claimed to be. And finally he gets caught and imprisoned, and they're like, well, we figured out you're not who you said you were, and you robbed us of Duncan Walpole, so you're going to die. And then they send him on a treasure fleet of the Spanish, and that gets sunk in a storm, but Edward and Adewale, a slave, were able to escape and commandeer a small ship from within the treasure fleet, and they name it the Jackdaw, and he becomes a pirate captain in earnest and helps and is one of the leaders in the Pirates Republic of Nassau. And meanwhile, they're all looking for the observatory where you can use these crystal skulls with the cubes to view things, and he wants to use it to basically become the richest people on the planet, because at this point he's just a pirate and he's out there for money, and his whole goal is to get a bunch of money and then go back to Britain to marry this girl who he doesn't know he has a kid with, but he does. And it's a story about basically a man who goes from greed to realizing that there's more important things in life. As the pirate republic collapses and all the pirates are brought in, he actually gets away from being killed as a pirate that got captured. Adewale becomes an assassin after seeing the kind of problems that Edward's lust for money and control get him, and Edward by the end of the game realizes it and helps the assassins stop the Templars, who have a way to access the observatory. And then the game ends with him returning to Britain when he learned he has a daughter, and the woman that he wanted to go back for had died. And his daughter comes to see him, and then he brings her back to Britain and settles down as a rich pseudo-noble in the early 1700s. And we know what happens to him after. He's still involved with the assassins in Britain, and he gets close to Edward Braddock, who is a Templar, and they kind of try to make how do I explain? They try to make a truce to figure stuff out. Braddock kills him and then takes his kid Hytham. So he has a kid after the fact named Hytham Kenway. And he basically raises Hytham as a Templar, and he becomes Templar Grand Master in the American colonies going forward in Assassin's Creed Rogue, which takes place during the 7 Years' War. So, or as Americans call it, the French and Indian War.
Ah, okay.
The French and Indian War is the American theater of the 7 Years' War, which is basically the first big world war with muskets and things. And it started by George Washington because he crosses into French-controlled parts of the colonies and fights the French because of Native American basically allies and stuff, and that literally starts a war that lasts for 7 years and ends in the colonies before it ends in Europe, and that's why it's called the 7 Years' War most other places. But in the backdrop of this, you have the assassins under Ulysses. I think his name's Ulysses. Hold on.
What I find interesting is they're including the number 7, like the thing with the issue takes place is it 77,000 years prior, something like that. I noticed the use of the number seven, and sevens and nines are used quite a bit. Star Trek likes to use this quite a bit. The nines depict Egyptian deities, which are actually negative, and sevens are more in the realm of biblical. Michael's associated with number seven, things of that nature, the right hand of God, things of that nature. And also numerologically, you have nine meaning completion, you have seven being like a beginning. So it's like, or overall number of God. Yeah. So I see they're using this repeatedly in this lore too, where I haven't seen as many nines though. I see the sevens popping up repeated, like 7 years war. So this, you're seeing a lot of this pop up. So the sevens are usually a clue where somebody's trying to nines are usually a clue where somebody's trying to insert some form of disclosure, but also a narrative at the same time. I always tell people to look for this because it's whenever the sevens and nines are inserted, you're seeing some kind of narrative or something being played out in the plot. Somewhere.
His name is Achilles Davenport, not Ulysses. Sorry.
Okay.
Achilles is leading the assassins in basically the New World British colonies, and he's not a very good leader. Essentially, he basically, in the means to try to stop the Templars from getting their hands on Isu stuff, preemptively sends out the main character of this game, Shay Patrick Cormac, who is a Irish character, and he famously makes his own luck. He keeps saying that throughout the whole game. And basically the 17, I believe it's the 7, it's a big earthquake that like destroyed all of Lisbon, is caused by his meddling in this temple. I'm just going to look it up to get the year. 1755 Lisbon earthquake was essentially caused in this universe by Shay's meddling for the assassins in underneath Lisbon in this Isu temple. And Shay comes back noticeably pissed off, like, we caused this great disaster that destroyed the Portuguese capital. We have to stop doing this. And Ulysses, Achilles, I don't know why I keep calling him Ulysses. Achilles keeps basically being like, no, we have to do this to stop the Templars from controlling everything. And Shay turns his back on the assassins and becomes a Templar to stop the assassins from doing what they're doing. And throughout the game, Shay unravels all of the assassin order that was already existing in the colonies. He kills most of his former assassin brothers and sisters. He kills Adewale from Assassin's Creed Black Flag, who is now like the leader of the Caribbean version of the assassins. At the same time, he's working with Haytham, who is Edward's son, in the colony. So you get this crazy, weird reunion of Kenway, the son of Edward, meeting with Adewale. And Adewale has this confrontation where they're fighting him and he's about to die. And he's like, your father was a great man, and if you did things differently, you would be a great man. And he's like, my father was... I know little of what my father did, but he was on your side. Because he's been raised by Templars since he was, I think, like 8. So he doesn't view his father as this great man. But Adewale does, because he saw his father go from this like pirate to a man that actually cares about other people and stopping this and being a major figure in the Assassin Templar War at that era. And Shay finally catches up with Achilles, who's about to go into one of these temples again and do it again. But I think it was in this time it would have been like Quebec City, which isn't as big as Lisbon, but him and Haytham stop Achilles, but they don't kill him because Shay makes the point. Well, really, what they need him for Assassin's Creed 3, and he was already in that as an old man. So they don't kill him, but Shay makes the point that if we kill him, the assassins will do this again in the future. Like they won't learn from what they did. So Haytham, to stop Achilles from ever being an assassin really again, shoots him in the knee so he can't like walk well. and then they leave. And Achilles goes back to his homestead and has to like just kind of stew there until the Revolution period, when when Hatham's child Connor shows up. So Hatham has a kid with a Native American named Zio, and they have Connor, or and his native name is like Raha Kaketan or something. It's a like, I believe it's like an Iroquois word. I can't pronounce it properly, but he's raised by his mother, and then their village is destroyed by oh god, what's his name? Charles Lee, who is the right hand man to Hatham now, because Shay went to Europe to take out the father of someone else that we'll talk about in a bit. He and then he just doesn't come back for some reason. But Connor's village gets destroyed, and he goes to Achilles because he's shown in a vision while using the Apple of Eden that was like his tribe's great treasure. Because the whole reason Charles Lee is there for the Templars is because the tribe that Connor's part of is tasked with keeping an Isu temple safe. And Connor goes on like this vision quest and is guided by the Isu, I believe it's what's her name? Juno, to go find Achilles. And he goes on this vision quest, and then he goes and finds Achilles, and he starts his training as an assassin, and he learns about his father being the leader of the Templars in the colonies. And his whole thing is he wants Charles Lee. If you play that game, he's always like, give me Lee, because he wants revenge. Later in the game, he finds out that that's the real reason Lee was there was stuff for the Templars in the background, but actually George Washington sent him because the natives had been helping the British in raiding. Well, not helping the British yet, because the revolution hadn't started at that point yet, but had been like raiding stuff, and George Washington sent them to destroy their village, like as a punitive action. So then what happens is he gets embroiled into the Assassin Templar conflict in the background of the Revolutionary War. Most of the Templars tend to be British generals in that conflict, except for Charles Lee, who happens to be on the revolutionary side. And Connor helps the revolutionaries in battles like Bunker Hill, as well as at Jamestown at the end of the conflict. And the major two cities you play in is Boston and New York in the colonial period. Connor has a falling out with George Washington. He learns that Washington ordered an attack on his village once it was rebuilt. He worked with his father for a bit to bring in like a rebellious Templar named Edward Braddock. Not Edward Braddock. Oh god, I forgot his name. Edward Braddock was killed in the 7 Years' War in the beginning of that game, outside of the events that affect Shay. Because you play as Hatham in the beginning of the game, you see Hatham like take control of the Templars there, and you actually, the whole beginning of that game, you think he's an assassin, but you learn that he's a Templar in this like really cool cutscene, and Desmond, the main character for like the modern day, is like, wait, what? And then it cuts out, and then you become Connor. And then Connor ultimately unravels the Templars there, ends up killing his father and getting his father's journal and learning about him. And then there's this beautiful, it's a whole book called Assassin's Creed. Man, I gotta look it up because it's a great book.
I find it interesting with Desmond, though, where he's connecting back to the genetic memory. Like that's essentially like a genetic tree version of the chronovisor. They said that the Vatican has, where they're tapping into frequency. This taps into genetic frequency. So lineage. So yeah.
It's called Assassin's Creed Forsaken. You get to learn about Hatham, like growing up as a Templar, and his thoughts about the things going on in Assassin's Creed 3. And at the end of that book, Connor gives like a monologue about he didn't understand his father, but he understand why he did what he did type stuff, and begins to like actually view his father in like a positive light. He then will go on to basically rebuild the assassins in the colonies / early America. And Achilles dies like just of old age after, well, once Connor's kind of done this and passes the torch to him. And that's Connor's story, except for the fact that Connor, through the events of Connor, Desmond learns how to activate the Isu shield that stops like it from destroying all of human civilization. I am not going into more of that plot line because that's like the major plot line for the first like 5 games in the Assassin's Creed series. So not going to touch any more on that.
Okay.
Leave that to people to play. But it's cool. It's tragic. It's interesting. Assassin's Creed Liberation is a side, like one of those like side series games where you play as actually the chick who's right behind the Liberation thing in this picture. She is a black French colonial assassin from New Orleans, and she works with Connor a little bit to get rid of Templars in New Orleans. It's a very small game. It's interesting if you're into that, but it's not a major game in the series by any means. There's another one that was tied to Black Flag, but it's not on this list, and that one I find more compelling. That one is Adewale helping during the Haiti revolts, where the slaves overthrew the French government in Haiti. So next we go into Assassin's Creed Unity. I have not played this game, but I know a bit about it. That takes place in French Revolution, Paris, and you play as Arnaud Dorian, and he is again like a generational assassin who has like a love story with a Templar like princess essentially, because she's not like the leader, but she becomes the leader of the Templars by the end of the game. They have this like relationship that's on and off. And they create like by the end of that game, they'd create an alliance between the Templars and the assassins in Paris, at least. And an interesting thing that ties Assassin's Creed Rogue and Assassin's Creed Unity together is Arnaud was also raised by the family of the Templars, but didn't become a Templar because Shay killed Arnaud's father. So the end mission of Assassin's Creed Rogue is Shay killing Arnaud's father, and then you get to see it from both sides. Then that is Unity has stuff that I don't know about for like the Isu plot line, but you get to go through the offense of the French Revolution. You get to meet Napoleon. You get to interact with like Marie Antoinette and things, and free France. The last 3 games are ones I have not played as well. We know that the Chronicles series are like side-scrolling games. They're not major. I haven't played them. I don't think most fans have played them. And then Syndicate takes place in Industrial Revolution, London. You run a gang led by the twins. Well, one of them's this chick. Her name's Evie, and I believe her brother is oh god, what's his name? Jacob and Evie Fry. And they have like a gang in this London, and their gang's the Assassins, and they fight rival gangs, which are Templars. He figures out who Jack the Ripper is. There's like a whole Jack the Ripper thing.
Interesting. I created him in as one of the yeah.
And yeah, that's Assassin's Creed's games. There's one more coming out soon. It's going to be roughly here in the timeline. It's going to be taking place in feudal Japan. You've probably, if you follow gaming, you've probably heard about all the controversy surrounding it. I'm not going to touch too much on that, but it's not being well received because they take a shit all over Japanese like history and culture. And we'll have to see what happens after it's out. But it is not being well received, and I'm not going to go any more into detail on that because story-wise, we don't know. We just know that there's a female assassin, more like a ninja character, and then there's Yasuke. And I'm not going into that controversy here because it's just negative. But he was not a samurai, and that's where I'll leave it.
Yeah, exactly. But pretty much a slave-ish character, but not an assassin. But also, yeah, Ubisoft, they fucked up royal over that. Just trust me. Uh, so yeah, especially with the whole broken Torii Gate controversy, where they showed Yasuke in front of a broken Torii Gate. That's basically might as well slap the Japanese in the face over that. So that's essentially a World War II symbol. Essentially, if I believe it was Nagasaki, they had the broken Torii Gate from the atomic bombs. Yeah, so and that was a symbol of war, symbol of their defeat. Yeah, how big of a kick in the nuts do you need to do to the Japanese people with that? So yeah,
And also, if people don't know who Yasuke is, he was a black man that got close to a samurai daimyo who I believe at the time was also shogun or was very close to shogun, and he essentially was a novel guy that they dressed up in armor and allowed him to fight, but he wasn't like class based to samurai. That's why there's this big controversy around it, because a lot of people are like, well, he wasn't a samurai. You're calling him a samurai. He is, because samurai is a class in Japanese society at this point, and it had various like pageantry associated with it, all of which Yasuke didn't have because he was just a foreigner that was dressed up in armor because the Oda Nobunaga thought he was cool because he was black. Because black people were not known in Japan really before that, because Japan was a notoriously isolationist state on the edge of the world in most people's opinions, and the Europeans were only allowed to trade in one place, and they met him as like a worker on a ship for the Dutch, I believe. And yeah, the Yasuke story is not like a good one.
no,
And it's not probably the best choice they could have used as a main character for a Japanese samurai era game.
Yeah, and a lot of people wanted that game to be like the previous Shogun games and things of that nature. You know, they wanted it to be, you know, fully engrossed in feudal Japan and everything. Not Yasuke. That no, they did not want that at all. So yeah. So okay, I think yeah, this has been fascinating to dive into this particular lore. I didn't realize it was this extensive. I hadn't really gotten into it completely the Assassin's Creed lore. I didn't realize it was this extensive, especially linking it to the Anunnaki history and also the government project history with different remote viewing, time travel, and like the animus and things of that nature. So. And so that's very interesting that this was synchronistically chosen at this time to talk about. So, and I do agree though, Ryan. What we said in private, they shouldn't be completely turning it into this big fantasy thing. It should be historical, mixing some things periodically in there, and that's about it. You know.
Yeah, some of the games have taken a very mythological like inspiration instead of following historical events and then having like the technological magic in there as a um like a plot device for major end game like events, sort of like how Assassin's Creed 2 does it if you go play that game. That game did it very well. You don't have any of these devices till the very end of the game, and you don't keep them after the events of that for the rest of the game. And when you continue playing, it is used for a story mission, and it's not used again. Whereas in later games, you get like Thor's hammer and that kind of stuff. So it's not what I would have picked.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? I also noticed there's one thing before we go into channeling. There in part of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, where you go into Francia and places like that. You know, you go and you know, I believe you also get, I believe, the Apple of Eden at one point, or the sphere that's in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it interesting the parallels between, and I noticed this when I was playing, where where the Apple is making people like have nightmares and dream, you know, and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
act weird and everything. In Elder Scrolls, it was the same, and with Dawnstar and the artifact of Vermina as well, with that quest where it was causing nightmares. I noticed some parallels between the two.
Yeah,
So,
that's the DLC
yeah,
uh, for Valhalla. I
yeah,
haven't played through that,
yeah.
but one of the most interesting things that Assassin's Creed did is back during Assassin's Creed 3, there was a DLC called The Tyranny of King Washington, and it was if George Washington had an apple. Now, George Washington did have an apple for a time. We know that from like the codex that the game has that's like background information.
Mhm.
If he had kept it, basically the game said he would have become a king, a tyrant king. And the fact that him and Connor like learn this and are able to get him to stop having the apple is what allowed America to be born, basically.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. You know, I also noticed that they did a little bit of a parallel of this in the show Grimm years ago, where they had these bracelets that would make people be overpowered mentally and become this real egocentric type of personality. And they show in that lore they show Hitler as obtaining them, and that's why he became the way he became, kind of deal. And so it's along a similar thread to that, like an artifact is over bloating somebody's like darker side, essentially, and or like the One Ring type of thing, and
Yeah.
you know,
Well, I mean, the apples are always portrayed in this as like an artifact that is temptation because what it does is allows you to control other people.
oh,
That
okay,
is what the apples of Eden are used for. You can force people to do things against their will with the apple of Eden, or you can just like I don't know how it works, but like they just raise it and like drop it, and it can like create a shockwave that just like kills people.
well, that's interesting. It also goes with like what some of the what we've said about galactic history, about some of the different sphere technology, like some of these spheroid type of technology can actually mind control people. So it kind of there's a parallel running with certain galactic history too. Well, there's certain liberties that have been taken with it, like with the actual history that's being told. There's liberties with the galactic history too. I've noticed in there. So if people know the galactic side as well as the regular historical side, you're seeing they're taking liberties on both accounts. Okay, I think we can go. God, there's a lot of cottonmouth. Hmm. All right, I think we can go into channel. Who wishes to speak this morning? Oh, Isaac, yeah, of course. You know, seeing as you're depicted in one of them, that would believe that's the character of Alcibiades in Odyssey.
Oh yes, Alcibiades in
Mm. So
Assassin's Creed Odyssey.
yeah, yeah,
Let's pause for that for 1 second to
yes,
talk about this
yes.
character.
We got to add him in there because that is Isaac in one of his previous
His,
incarnations.
historically, Alcibiades was kind of a flip flopper in the Peloponnesian War. He was a general for Athens. Then he failed miserably during the Syracusan campaign to Syracuse in Italy. Then he went to Sparta and had an affair with the Spartan queen, one of the Spartan queens, because Sparta had two kings. Was thrown out of Sparta. I don't know how he survived, but he did. I think it was because he gave a lot of good information to the Spartans that they used against the Athenians. And then he ended up back in Athens by the end of his life. But in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, they portray him as this like hermaphroditic, like just like degenerate that
This flame,
um,
yeah.
yeah, he like sleeps with everybody. It's like if you took Astarion from Baldur's Gate 3 and you just put him in ancient Greece, and he's just like he's a big flirt. He's trying to sleep with everybody. He's a statesman, but he doesn't really know what's going on most of the time.
That's all. And then there was a rumor had it that he also poisoned some of the Athenian people's food and all this other crap.
I believe he did that historically as well. He was a very interesting character.
Yeah.
Just from the sense of just like a weird guy that was in the backdrop of the Peloponnesian Wars.
I just heard him say, "We're not all perfect," I guess. So
I wasn't implying that you were, but yeah, I mean,
but no,
you had it's a reputation that came down to us 2,500 years later.
yeah, that's hilarious. You know, that was one of his incarnations. So he would know. He remembers his incarnations very much like if anybody saw the movie Infinite with Mark Wahlberg and Chadwell Ejiofor from Marvel. Essentially, they that's essentially the way they're remembering their past lives in that movie. This is also how some of the Assassin's Creed things are going, where the people are incarnated gods essentially. With him, he's remembering the past lives, like the like the characters in that movie, and also if people saw the Assassin's Creed movie with Michael Fassbender, he's remembering his past lives as well. He's in an insane asylum in that movie. Mark Wahlberg's character is essentially on medication because he thinks he has schizophrenia. See the pattern that's going on there. So Isaac, if you want to do this, uh, yes. This is actually very interesting that one of the premises, and I'll focus on this for the moment, even though, yes, the Anunnaki history is being loosely told, and he said there's liberties taken, very much like the solar flare knocking out their homeworld, things of that nature. That falls in Nibiru, and also Asgard is placed in this as well. Nibiru being from the real dark timeline, and then Asgard being from our own here. Now, the animus is something that is actually a true thing being depicted in this, whereas you can scan your own genetic memory. Ebens actually gave this particular technology to humans, whereas you can scan your own essentially amino acids, DNA, RNA, amino acids, things of that nature. And you can actually look back within someone's genetic history and turn that into ones and zeros and look back as a video. So what they are depicting is you could literally look back to the beginning of your genetic line and also what came before that. It does have some limitations. You can even create videos that you could post on YouTube if you wanted to, or Rumble, or any sort of social media. Now, with this, somebody linking to their own genetic history, yes, would that person in the past be able to interact with you? Yes, but also you have other timelines to consider as well. Just like they depict in Marvel with the branch timelines, this actually happens. This is what the Yggdrasil tree is all about. What happens with this, though, is here's the catch. If you would say interfere instead of just view, and this has happened within some of the temporal wars and things of that nature, where if you would say interfere and that past self knows that they're being viewed from a future self, this could cause a timeline schism, or what you would call a paradox, by which then could create a branch timeline, but at the same time, if a certain technology, let's just say if I can describe this, if let's say something like the animus is grounded, like as an actual factual point, is what time travel devices generally are. Like the chronovisor can view different temporal frequencies. With this, if it's grounded and you actually anchor to an ancestor, could it create the branch timelines? Yes, but it could also alter the individual one that you're on, like you see in a lot of sci-fi where it does alter time a little bit. this is actually essentially what you're seeing in your Star Trek lore, by which then, say, the bridge of the Enterprise changes, or the layouts of the Constitution class changes, or he makes fun of it to where they, in Discovery, where they made it so that people didn't recognize Klingons. He always says they didn't know what Klingons looked like. In the end, in your Lower Decks last couple episodes, they showed that it actually came from multiple timelines and multiversal energies, which they tied that loose end up with a bow. And now, with something like the Animus, it's something like that. Can it go look into parallel universes? Yes, but it goes to wherever something like the Animus would go to, wherever only your genetics would have walked the Earth. They can program the parameters also to go into galactic as well, but generally they use it for Earth. Now with the chronovisor, it's similar, where they can lock into a particular historical period based on the frequency that historical period exists in. This also is depicted in your Star Trek Discovery, where the Giorgio character went into the 31st century and was having temporal like a temporal psychosis or aphasic type of condition, because the frequency would always try to bring her back to where she originally came from. So she was dying, they had to send her back. A frequency over here and a frequency here, you tell this frequency to go here, and it brings it back over here. This is how galactics travel. If it can't get there, you cause a psychosis in the person. And that's a real medical condition that they were showing. Within this type of thing, frequencies are how they view things. The Animus is actually, it's a real type of technology. It's not called this. It's basically some boring name, like a number designation of some kind. But with this also, they were depicting a bit of the Anunnaki history, and also the reason that they can't seem to get history right. The actual history that you talk about, Ryan, the reason they keep skewing is actually a form of a narrative in and of itself. This is not only to aggravate people, but this is a way to get people not only to fight amongst what the actual history is. This is as far as looshing and all that goes. But this, someone good is trying to depict some of the disclosure history. Someone bad is trying to skew things that may have happened in history, very much like your Assassin's Creed Shadows, where it is mainly dependent on a political narrative, you see, where they're trying to skew it to favor their own political agendas. This is also what is going on with the fact that they can't seem to get history right. They are essentially either wanting to rewrite it, or going, oh, we're going to revolutionize this and just not go with what the source material is. That you see this in fictional source material as well, from Marvel to DC to Star Trek, Star Wars, things of that nature. But like with those, they're attempting to forward a political agenda as well. This is why you are seeing these alterations and change. Also, sheer laziness, which was the Grecian temple and pillar situation you were talking about, that sheer laziness on their part. And also the things with the statues, they wanted to make it more grandiose as possible, but going away from the actual history. So it's a mixed bag of all of these things. So I can take questions.
Okay. First question would be, does this, like, using the time manipulating technology, tie into like Montauk Project stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that would be like the Montauk chair, you see, where someone would bilocate into a different time frame. That was more set to pretty much be the timeline itself, and not necessarily per an individual. You basically be bilocating there as a person, as yourself, walking amongst them as more of a ghost in that timeline. Or in some instances, they would attach to an ancestor and attempt sometimes to rewrite their own history, but they cause a lot of paradoxical timelines, as I said before, skews. But they actually created these paradoxical branches by which then create negative outcomes, like what they depicted in Avengers Endgame, with the stones being taken from different timelines. That the Sorcerer Supreme said that would cause different negative skews. This is what the Montauk Project did with that same identical technology, where they sat in the chair and they would bilocate to these different areas, attempting to see where they would basically rise and fall, essentially where the cabal would rise and fall. In this instance, they looked far enough ahead. You even see this in your Simpsons TV series, especially with the Trump material on the escalator. You've heard of this, where you see Homer following him down the escalator, and that event actually took place in real life in 2016. So, with that said, even in the episode Bart to the Future, I believe it was 2003, was depicting this. So yes, this is from that viewing technology, and they try to skew it or they try to alter it to unfold the timeline as they see fit. The Gardner family is the main culprits behind this. You hear the Sverdlov time travel family and the Gardner family altered events even back in Jamestown to where particular people did not get a holding to be eventually would become a figure. Just like you said, that man was shot in the knee so that he couldn't become an assassin. Think that for a moment. Think if somebody would have become a major leader in the colonies, and you did not approve of their genetic line of becoming that particular leader, and you had the ability to go back in time and manipulate this. It's one of those. If you had the ability to go back and kill Hitler, would you? In this case, essentially John Smith, or essentially Joseph Smith, excuse me, John Smith. His brain is skewing. Give me a second. In Jamestown, he would have become a leader, but in this, there were temporal agents that went back there and almost caused Jamestown's downfall. This is very similar in this respect. These were agents of Montauk utilizing the chair. They had silver boxes with them that were temporal anchors that would not only prevent us of psychosis and aphasia, but would then yo-yo them back to the appropriate time frame after their mission was complete. Think Quantum Leap, but evil in this particular way, where they also had the Ziggy being the AI in that was assisting them. They had Lothos being the evil one on the other end. These were government projects and how the cabal factions actually and government projects actually and philanthropists actually fight each other. You see, that's what that show is depicting. Now, with the Montauk chair, they caused a lot of paradoxical timelines that are actually having to be healed within the overall Yargzadril tree. This is essentially what's going on with your Mandela effect, where timelines are being folded into each other.
Okay. So would it be advised to even do this kind of ancestral viewing?
Yes and no. For historical purposes, absolutely. If you're trying to discover, say, where an artifact went, say the Ark of the Covenant, which is one of the only bigger magical artifacts left on the planet. All the rest are actually, as he said, in storage somewhere. Cold storage, to be to be exact. Not in Antarctica or anything like that, but they are in a cold storage. I will not reveal where. But the Ark of the Covenant is more of an arc forge. Now, making the weapons of the gods originally, the dwarves making the weapons of the gods, this is essentially what builds it because it's linked to the multiverse. This is why it's dangerous. It's using also a nuclear fusion drive in it as well. This, which is also dimensionally based. Is it good to view in the past like this? Yes and no. This is where the paradoxical timeline comes in. Say if you're just viewing, are you not altering things by the viewing thereof? Think Schrodinger's cat. It is both dead and alive so long as you do not see it. So this is where the paradox comes in. If you want to learn about history, view, but at the same time, know in the viewing, you are causing paradoxical schisms. So to learn also is to incur sacrifice in a different area. He likes to say goofily in this, it's like Family Guy, where they go to the parallel universe where the poop is disappearing from people. Then they find in a frozen universe, as Stewie says, there's the poop from the other universe. There is action and consequence to this. You see, in the viewing, you basically create a turd somewhere else. It has to always happen this way to account for the viewing, meaning the energies and the frequencies you're incurring upon, and the effect over here by which then it is balanced. There is always cause and effect no matter what you do. There is always cause and effect. So yes, if you wish to learn, yes, but there is absolutely no way to buffer the other.
Okay. So these artifacts that are in cold storage, what do they do?
Well, you have Thor's hammer that was originally there, but he is, as you said, off recording. He actually owns this now. He holds this with him. The same thing goes with Odin's spear. He is actually currently in possession of this. The cold storage is essentially where, say, okay, here's an example. Say if you had a Scandinavian god or Viking god or Asgardian, however you want to view it. Say they had a particular weapon. Say they fell on the battlefield to an enemy, and say that weapon fell on the battlefield. How do you prevent that falling into the hands of mankind? Like what you were saying with the game, it's unrealistic to have Mjolnir in the hands of somebody through history. That would have been reported, yes. Some certain things were reported in mythology when some things fell into the hands of mankind. Think your Conan for a second with the Riddle of Steel, where it fell onto the battlefield kind of thing. This is essentially that. And essentially, that story is true. Karum would tell you this. The cold storage. What this does is it takes the energy, power, and essence of that weapon and holds it in abeyance and holds it in limbo. So therefore, its energy cannot even be sensed within your dimensional plane. It's another dimensional space by which it is technologically ruled. Think of like you opening your refrigerator and you removing and placing food within it, or the freezer. It empties and it fills. Think of a temporal or timeline space by which something can be stored in that way. Or like in your Matrix movie where they were in that void where they could create. This is not the void dimension by which was also spoken about. This is more like a space that was created, like how Odin recreated Asgard after the explosion thereof, after the Ragnarok, wanted to preserve Asgard. A similar thing was done for the preservations of the weapons of the gods. Is essentially it's freezing cold there. It's essentially, how can I put this? If you went there, you would not survive. It would be essentially you would be floating in a frozen void. Essentially, like we said, the turd or the poop from the other universe. When this was created, it actually had to anchor within the actual void dimension because of the fact that when you create something, it must have a counterbalance. The void, the beings of the guardianship of the void, then created this counterbalance. When this occurred, these weapons were held in limbo so that mankind did not get a hold of them, and other rival factions to Asgard and other groups would not get a hold of these. Chrome also knows about this. He's put these weapons within a temple space for the fallen gods, let's just say, where he inserts them into a rock, but then that weapon then goes to this frozen storage. It would look, from your perspective, it would look like you were literally putting a weapon onto a stone and it melted into the stone and showed an embossed image of it, like an artistic rendering. It's actually existing within that dimensional space. I hope this helps.
How would one who has claim to said item retrieve it?
They would have to have both the soul and genetic frequency of that original being. Essentially, think your Stargate program where you had the ancient gene, whereas like the episode where the man went to a garage sale and found an ancient artifact and connected to the O'Neill character's memories from the Stargate program. Think that an ancient gene because the man had the ancient gene. Think this, where you would have to have the genetic proclivity, like Excalibur did in the show too, where they had to actually be a descendant of Arthur. That's how Merlin set it up in the show. In this, or Mirrodin as the case may be in that show, in this, it's essentially you would have to have the soul energy, like you see in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, where one is the incarnation of Odin and one Loki. You would have to have a dynamic like that, and you would have to have also some genetic proclivity to that, like someone being descendant of the very person that they were incarnating as. This is more of a combination lock. You can also access Atlantean technology in a similar way, like in the Stargate Atlantis show and SG-1. You would then go to this place, which is very difficult to get to, by the way. Think Skyrim and the Dragon Walls and things of that nature. It's fairly difficult to get to. And it's a similar thing, too, where the words actually come to you in a similar way, like the dragon language. You go up to that place, you would then touch this device, it's stone technology, then you would be able to either speak or show your essence to this device, or the oversoul would show itself, or not, to this device. Therefore, then you would be able to reclaim the object. There is a lot of endurance necessary to get to it. It's very high up in the mountains, and it's also in a certain vibratory frequency that it would be very, very hard to get to. And also, there's a perception filter in place. Chrome would tell you that this is located in the Atlas Mountains in Africa, also near the Eye of Sahara. This is where Atlantis City was before the fight between Enki and Enlil, or Poseidon and Zeus came to a head. And this is what blighted the land. This is what also created the Sahara Desert to begin with, and parts of Egypt that are now desert encased. This is why they found green glass there, was because of a nuclear-esque explosion. I hope this helps in explanation.
It did, thank you.
Yes.
I have no further questions, so I open the floor to you.
All right. Yes, this is all I have for today with this program. This is very interesting. It goes into this topic. Also, the John Wick series is also linked to the Cabal and Masons as well, with the whole everything beneath them under the table kind of concept. It's very similar. It goes with a mythology in your ancient Middle East, where it had to be a story. There was a story he knows about, the old man in the mountain that would send assassins out to take his rivals, political rivals, to try to shape the world in his own image. Very similar. It's a very obscured Middle Ages story, but this is also based on some of this material as well. It's fairly difficult to find material on it. You may find mythology, you may find just some stories this guy wanted to bloat about his own reputation and his power, which was mainly the purpose. But some of this sprang from that on a historical basis. So I will disconnect that now. So thank you. All right. Yeah, that's actually very interesting. Yeah, the Animus I knew was based off pretty much like the Montauk chair, essentially. Except they show in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, they show them laying in a coffin, or it's like a sarcophagus type of deal, or stasis chambers. Some of the Galactics have these stasis chambers where they get into them, and then they can incarnate through technology, like what you see how the Yggdrasil tree and all that is in its SU technology in that game lore. You have the stasis chambers by which they can force incarnate. So it does exist to do that. The Orions also have the forced incarnation grid, like struggle, suffering, all of that. That's how the Draco Lush people. And also you have the soul trade, which we've spoken out in the past, where some people have implemented that on other planets. They take ghosts and souls from here and incarnate and grab them and put them there. And I've even seen ghosts in graveyards like Forest Home Cemetery, where you see ghosts lined up in Illinois, where you saw the ghosts lined up against their gravestones, and they thought an angel had told them to stay there, but it was really a soul trader. So I've seen these before. I won't reinvent the wheel for this, but that's a different episode. But this, if people want to see more on that, I'll be more than happy to talk about it. But we've said it ad nauseum in the past too. But with this, it's very you see a lot of similarities to a lot of these type of galactic texts and governmental projects. So yeah, this is where I'm at with this. Ryan, did you have anything else to add?
No.
Okay. All right. This is a good place that we could pretty much take this out. Thank you, everybody, for watching this episode. You're going to be seeing a lot of these type of episodes going to their own Rumble channel, so don't be alarmed that some have been removed from the YouTube. I noticed a glitch in the YouTube that was that had tripped a shadow banning algorithm sometime around 2020. So what I did was I deleted stuff from before then and put it on Rumble, and it seemed to release the shadow banning algorithm. It's no longer a thing on there. So it was something within that time bracket. I don't know which one set it off. It could have been one word spoken. Have no clue. So that's the reason I did that. So one of the reasons I did that, I wanted to make it more organized to topic and genre types. as well, like a big archive or library. So people are thinking that it's getting canceled. It's not. I'm doing this. So just so people aren't alarmed. So thank you everybody for watching this episode, and I now close this circle within true benevolence and no conflicting agendas as of this moment in time. So thank you everybody. Bye bye now.
Bye.
Well, here's an interesting bit of a synchronicity or connection. Episode 22 of Season 2, there's 3 twos, of Deep Space Nine, known as The Wire. Bashir tries to save Garrick from a bizarre illness that is soon discovered to be a strange addiction. It was a neural implant that was put in Garrick by a group called the Obsidian Order. Why am I bringing this up? Because it's associated with the talk Ryan and I did on Assassin's Creed. The Obsidian Order is just exactly like the group of assassins, the good guys that are in it, or supposed good guys. Well, sort of. The Obsidian Order were technically more like the Dark Brotherhood in Oblivion and Skyrim. Well, Elder Scrolls lore, and all those both belong intermixed into the story of Assassin's Creed, because it's pretty much the same thing. Tane, the head leader of the Obsidian Order, it's very much like the founders of the Order. So, or like the Dark Brotherhood. These are all interchangeable because, it's just like the Order of the Agents and the Assassins in Assassin's Creed lore. You can't always tell who's the good guys and bad guys because they're all doing the same shit. One defends the gods, one defends freedom. But who gets stuck in the middle? Just like what we were talking about on a show we did with Brian today on his network. What Isaac was saying. While the Cabal families, usually the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, go at it, who gets stuck in the middle? Whether warfare against each other, who gets hurt in the middle? But you want to see a really well-acted episode of Deep Space Nine. Episode 22, The Wire. Meaning the wire in his head. And also meaning news and information, the wire. So that's also code for... Wire is code for information, like the old telegraph. So, covert. So, yeah. I find it very interesting. And the reason he was exiled, Eric is exiled to be a tailor, which is typical, assassin, cook, like the Steven Seagal, like Under Siege movies, he's a cook. There's cooks, there's tailors, yeah. And the reason he's exiled is he helps 2 kids, or you think he does. Anyway, he told a bad version of the story where he had killed someone's daughter by mistake, and he was exiled. And the other one, he was more compassionate. One, he was cruel. One, he was not. You didn't know which one was real. So the same goes with the assassins and the Orders of the Agents. You don't know to serve gods or to serve self, or to serve people. Service to self, service to others are both on this side. Service to gods on this side. But some join one, some join the other. So your choice, who is what. But in this well-acted episode, go watch it. It was a 3 and a 22 that came up on my countdown. 25 is the 9. Yeah, I'll say I knew year 9, which is 2025. Interesting things were going to come up, and this was one of them. And it was just so happened that we were watching this right at the right moment. And so it is 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Thursday, March 20th, 2025. Thank you.